haven't figured it out by now, the Democrat Party is evil. Just in general, as a body, they're evil. Now, the individual members of Congress themselves may not be evil, although I think you can make a case for some of them. The party itself is, right now, pretty evil. Everybody and their mom has heard about the joint session of Congress, or joint addressing of Congress, however you say that. And yeah, my voice kind of sucks, so might be coming down with something. So, anyways, yeah, Congress, they're hearing this speech from Trump, and he's going through all these accomplishments that he's claiming he's done. You know, maybe he has done these things, maybe he hasn't. I mean, obviously, I would err on the side of he's pretty much done all of it. But just for the sake of argument, we'll say that, you know, not everything he said was true. But the part about the 13-year-old kid, and I can't recall his name at the moment. I mean, you don't have to know the background to know that that was a touching moment. You know, if you have any compassion or empathy, you can tell that's a touching moment. In the same way that, you know, you see a cat saved from a tree by a fireman and you say, oh wow, that's touching. Isn't that nice? The Democrat Party doesn't see that. At least not as a whole. I believe there was one representative from Long Island that did stand and clap. At least that's all we know of. You can look at the crowd during that moment and they look pretty stone-faced, silent to me. It should be very illuminating to a lot of people. If you think the Democrat Party, or if you've ever thought the Democrat Party was compassionate, you can think again. Sorry, I'm going up a hill. It's just not going to happen. Okay. If you ever thought the Democrat Party was compassionate, they liked the little guy, they were looking out for black people even, I mean, that should be a glaring example that they're not. They use black people as a cudgel against the right. They use the lower class as a cudgel against the right. They don't care. These things don't matter. And I'm including other groups besides the little boy, the category that he would fit in, because it leads to a broader idea that the Democrats, if they don't care for this kid, who could they care about? Like, tell me, if they can't care for this little black kid who's been fighting brain cancer for the past 6 years, who can they feel compassion for? The answer is they don't. Other than for themselves. So, people need a reality check. I'm not even, totally opposed to ever voting Democrat. Although, I certainly am for the next, for the foreseeable future. I considered it in 2016. And then everybody I saw there was like, no, this just ain't it. I can't remember if Jamie Harrison was 2016 or 2018, but I was like, I'll consider him. And just, no thanks. Everyone they've ran since then has just been bad. Not even close to my values. Because the Democrat Party has been running farther and farther left. But in principle, or in theory, I'm not opposed to voting for a Democrat. I mean, consider Harry Truman. I've been reading a book about him, a biography by his daughter. And it's been very enlightening. He talks about how the rest of the Democrat Party totally screwed him, or tried to screw him over in his election. his only election that he actually ran for in 1948. Because he was not bought and paid for by the Democrat Party, they were going to try their hardest to run anybody else, literally anybody else. They tried so hard to get Eisenhower to run as a Democrat before he ever ran as a Republican, that they asked him in private if he would run, and he said no. And they kept on calling for it. They kept on, even after he's already declined in private. And, fair enough, sometimes people, they'll give into the pressure if you keep on asking for it enough. Well, they keep on asking. And then Eisenhower makes a public announcement that he is not running. It ain't happening. At this point, you got to think, okay, maybe we should find somebody else. Well, we still have time. If you really don't want to run Harry Truman, who, by the way, seemed like he was totally competent, if not a bit aloof in his speeches. He did not have the greatest approval because he tried doing canned speeches, and it just wasn't his way because he was a good Midwest, Southern, whatever you want to call Missouri, Christian boy. And so he ended up doing off-the-cuff speeches, and that's where he really shined. But at that point, he was still doing the pre-written speeches. But he was still a good candidate. He just wasn't bought and paid for by the Democrat Party. And so that is a Democrat I would vote for. But it's even more evidence that the Democrat Party isn't, and pretty much has never been, a very good party. They're always out for themselves. They're almost always out for themselves. The good Democrats are few and far between. And this has been going since at least the past century. We can look back at Woodrow Wilson, and he's not as bad as everybody says he is, but he ain't great. And I believe it goes back even further than that, all the way back to 1860 and the election of Abraham Lincoln. I think the first real Republican. He was fighting the, proto-Democrat Party. I can't recall exactly. I want to say they were officially the Democrat Republicans still, but they ended up being the Democrat Party. So they've been corrupt at least since then. And yes, I will admit that they used to be made up of the South. But I don't believe the true message of God was being understood in the South at that time. Or at least they had major issues that they needed to get over first. And then eventually they started to turn over to the Republican side. And the Democrat Party did reform in some ways. Not all the Democrat Party is always bad. But it's had this root corruption for time immemorial, I guess. And it's as worse as it's ever been today. Truly. I don't know any redeeming parts of the party unless you really love abortion. I don't get it. And maybe that's a good example of why they don't really care about this kid. This 13-year-old kid. Because they don't actually care about children. Why would they? They don't care about the millions of kids they're already killing. So why would it change for this one? So, if you're in the middle, and you're still considering voting Democrat, unless they make some major changes, and I'm not sure they really can make major changes, like big enough changes enough, that would be a totally different party if they were to actually make the changes that they need to make. But until they make those changes, I wouldn't bother. Because they're evil. That's just the long and short of it. Anyways, goodbye.